Hello, NaNoWriMo. I am Grant Faulkner, Executive Director of NaNoWriMo, and welcome to I guess this is our kickoff webcast for this year's I Wrote a Novel, Now What? Activities and discussion and conversation. And we're doing this because we want to help you finish your NaNoWriMo novel, revise your NaNoWriMo novel, publish it if you want to do that. And maybe self-publish it. And that's what we're focusing on today, actually, is self-publishing in particular.
Hello, NaNoWriMo.
And self-publishing with Kindle Direct Publishing and Kindle Vella in particular. And I don't know if you know about KDP and Kindle Vella, but Kindle Direct Publishing is this free, easy-to-use website that allows you to publish ebooks and paperback books and hardcover books. And they've been a long-time sponsor of NaNoWriMo. And they also have a bunch of resources on the their website to help you format your manuscript and then publish it and even market and promote it. So check it out after this webcast, and we'll talk more about that during this webcast. And then recently, Kindle introduced a new storytelling option called Kindle Vella. And Kindle Vella is cool because it allows US-based authors to publish serialized stories, which are super popular on the internet these days. And you can just publish like one short episode at a time. And there's a bunch to know about these platforms, of course, and a lot to know about, just revising and publishing your NaNoWriMo novel in general. And that's one reason we're hosting this webcast. I've actually self-published, and I published with a small press and a university press and a kind of large press. And every time I publish, I'm like, man, there is so much to know and so much new stuff to learn. And that goes especially if you're self-publishing, although traditionally publishing too, you're just going to wear so many different hats in the whole journey. So we want to take you from essentially writer to publisher and even marketer. And so, with that in mind, we've got two NaNoWriMo veteran writers who've gone on to have publishing success with Kindle Direct Publishing and Kindle Vella. Denise Swank is our kind of representative from the Kindle Direct Publishing side, and then Kimberly Titus is a Kindle Vella author, and I want to introduce them formally now. Denise Swank is a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today best-selling author, and she's sold over 3 million books. She writes romance and mysteries that feature characters to whom readers form a deep, enduring emotional connection. And one thing that continues to impress me about Denise, she has 6 children, and she hasn't lost her sanity. Although, as the father of 2, I think that's all a front,
It totally is.
Yeah.
It totally is.
Yeah, and maybe just in general. And then Kimberly Titus is the author of top faved Kindle Vella Murder, Mayhem, and Macarons. And after spending 25 years working in finance, she transitioned her career into writing during NaNoWriMo 2020. So big congratulations to Kimberly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and she now has 5 additional top fave stories exclusively available on the Kindle Vella platform. And she was born and raised in rural Alaska, where she spent many nights storytelling around a campfire. I wish we could do a whole webcast just based on that. And she now lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, with her husband and 2 children. So welcome, Denise and Kimberly.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. No, this is going to be a treat to talk to you. And just to start off, since you're NaNoWriMo veterans, and one of the things when I open up my NaNoWriMo novel, which I'm usually hesitant to do in January, because I'm just a little scared of it. I'm scared of the mess of it. And in some ways, I think I'm even scared of like what I want to do with it. Even if I really do want to revise and publish it, it's a transition zone, put it that way. And so I'm curious if each of you can kind of go back in time and remember when you opened up your NaNoWriMo novel and decided to take it to that next step of revision and publishing. And I'm also just intrigued by, like I always say, the best way to learn to write a novel is by jumping in and writing it. And so I think NaNoWriMo just kind of spawns this DIY mindset that you can, you're an entrepreneur from the start, and perhaps an authorpreneur. And so Denise, maybe since you've been publishing the longest, you could kick off the answer to that question.
Well, I may not have the answer you want. Okay, so the thing about NaNoWriMo is it taught me to write every day. Like I split it out. I knew to reach my 50,000 word goal, I had to get 1,667 words, I think, a day to do it. But I exceeded that. But I wasn't done on the end of the month. So I finished it in December, and then everybody said, let it sit. So I started another book, and then I went back and read the Nano book, and it was so bad. It was so bad.
That
I
happens.
was like, I was really excited about the first one, but I'd also like, I was kind of from the, back when I was writing, it started writing, you went trad, like self-publishing was vanity. So like I heard a lot of people say, you know, if your first couple novels might be a mess, you might not publish them. So, and I never did fix that one, but I did go on to write many, 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 many books after that. So I don't even know. I think I've got at least 70.
Wow.
Or I haven't counted. So yeah. But it just taught me to write, and writing became a habit, and that was really, really important for me to like to get that down. So yeah.
That's good to hear. How about you, Kimberly, since this all happened a little more recently for you?
Yeah, I'm relatively a new author. So I wrote Murder, Mayhem, and Macarons on NaNoWriMo 2020. So that's just literally 2 years ago. I finished that and I wrote it the 50,000 words. I completed it November 30th. I looked at it. I said, no one is going to read that. I had looked at it. I was like, kind of what Denise said about you don't publish maybe your first few. And that one, I didn't know what to do with. I was still struggling with genre. What genre could it be in? So I kind of shelved it until April. And then in April, Amazon started having wind of Kindle Vella, and they were looking for content and people who had content. And so when I went back, I reread it and I thought, could I edit that into a serialized fiction format? And so that's kind of how I transitioned from the NaNoWriMo to Kindle Vella.
That's so interesting, because that was one of my questions, is when you decided to publish in a serialized fashion. And it's so interesting that that happened after you wrote the novel, not before. So can you speak to that? Like, well, your next novel, will you plan it ahead to serialize it, or have you done it?
I actually have 5, but that was my first one. And I hadn't even heard of Kindle Vella when I wrote it. And I actually basically had to rewrite it once I learned exactly how to write serialized fiction. And yes, I definitely, when I write my new Vellas, I have written them in the context that they would be serialized.
That must have been an interesting lens to view your original work through, though, to like revise with serialization in mind. Like that's a whole different style of revision, I think, in some ways.
It was difficult. And luckily they were not launching the platform until that July. So I had until April to July to actually really hunker down and edit that piece. And I was glad, because I was there the first day it launched, and I haven't looked back since.
Well, I'm going to back up just a little bit, because I thought it was interesting that you said you waited until April to revise. And that's actually something we tell people, is after they write a rough draft, is to take some time away and to gain some objectivity, and then come in with like at least somewhat, of fresh eyes. And then I'm interested, Denise, also, like when you said that, those first, you write some novels that just aren't meant to be published, right? They're kind of practice novels, but they get you a step forward. And so I'm curious about that moment. Like for me, actually, I got to confess, like every novel I write, I'm not sure if it's worth publishing. Like it takes me a while to like get there and convince myself of that. So I'm curious about you, since you've written or you published so many. Like when do you know?
Whether it's publishable?
Yeah, or how do you know? Or do you still take that time? Or how
No, I don't really take that time because I have been so prolific. I haven't. I'm hoping to now. Like I'm kind of like rearranging my format, but especially back in the beginning, like learning the flow and the pacing of a book, I think that's really important. So I feel like I've kind of got that down now. Those just kind of naturally come to me. I don't plot. I did that book though. But I also want to say, even though my novel was really bad, I could have rewritten it and re-edited it or whatever. But I was just so invested in it. I was so used to writing that I was writing another book, and I was so much more invested in that than the first one. So I never saw that first book as a waste of time, because it jump-started things. But it's like, if whoever's watching, if your book is a mess, don't be scared of it. Writing is revision. And if you're scared to revise or don't want to, then you're in the wrong profession. It's just, I've tossed out 40,000 words out of a book before because it just didn't work. So can't be afraid to kill your darling. So that's just, yeah. So, but I also have a developmental editor who like looks at my books now and gives me advice. Now that I'm this far into my career, I don't have to change as much as I used to, but in the past, sometimes I have to change things. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was curious with you, Kimberly, with revision, especially since you're serializing your fiction. Do you plan out your plot meticulously beforehand?
So I'm a pantser writer. So it is a little bit more difficult, but I try for every season. So Vellas are written in seasons, episodes leading up to a season. And so I try to have my rough draft, at least a fast draft of the entire season written before I publish one episode. Because once you publish an episode, so let's just say you're up to episode 3, you can't go back and plant a glove or plant a clue or plant a character. You're kind of stuck. So you really got to know the outline before you start publishing your episodes.
Yeah, I imagine. I forgot to remind viewers that we're going to take viewer questions about halfway through the webcast, so about at the 30-minute mark. So please put your questions in chat, and Catherine, our trusty producer, will get them to us, and we'll answer your questions. We want to make sure we answer your questions as well. And Denise, I think for me, if I hear of an author who has 6 children, I'm like, how do they do it? And so I think that must be an elephant in the room somehow. And especially with self-publishing, which, as I mentioned earlier, requires more, perhaps more of you than if you traditionally publish. So I'm just curious, how do you write and then do all that extra stuff for self-publishing with 6 children?
Well, it was a lot harder back when I first started because my 2 youngest were 2 and 3. And then my daughter, I had a 2, 3, and 5-year-old. And then I had some older children. But I just learned to write everywhere. So like I started off writing at night, but it wasn't like I wasn't progressing fast enough to keep up with the pace of publishing. So like it was kind of a joke. I would post pictures on Facebook of where I was writing. Where's Denise writing now? In a dance, my kids at dance, at a softball field while they're at practice. Like writing in a car, I still write in a car. So you just have to learn to be adaptable and write everywhere to get your words in. But yeah, it's like self-publishing. It's not just writing. I say I'm more business. Like I would say I'm 60 to 70% business and 30% as an author. So yeah, self-publishing is really like freeing. You're in control, but you're also in control. You have to like run that business too.
What is the 60 and 70% of business? What does that include? I'm just curious how you define it.
That includes like making sure since I have so many books, making sure my files are up to date, doing promos and sales, doing newsletter swaps with other authors. I have a lot of meetings with people about various things, or dealing with cover designers. Like once you publish a book, trends change. So you might want to change your cover in 3 to 5 years. So you got to do some market research. So you got to go through and like look at the list and what's selling and then kind of get an idea and then talk, collaborate with your cover designer. So like I just recovered a series just this week, and it spent the entire day reformatting books, putting the new covers in, uploading them to the sites and all of that. So yeah, it's like it takes a lot more time than people realize.
Yeah, I know. I'm curious about what your take on that, Kimberly, and I don't know if you've figured out the percentage of the pie chart of your writing life, but how much do you dedicate to business?
Probably not as much as I should. I'm going to take some advice from Denise, but definitely I do I would say 2 days a week is definitely, between social media and reaching out to book groups or webcasts or whatever. Yeah, I would say a good 10 hours.
Wow. And you come from a finance background. Does that help you, that business background help you with that side of things too? Or even the creative side, maybe?
Well, finance isn't too much different. I've always been a storyteller. So I would tell in my finance career, I would tell stories about the numbers. Now my numbers kind of tell the stories about my books. So it's kind of the reverse.
I like that.
I really enjoy putting in my heroines, my Murder, Mayhem, and Macarons. She is an accountant. And so I was able to put her in. I don't think there's enough accountants as heroes. So she was it. And she has actually been in 2 more of my Vellas as a special cameo because of her expertise in accounting.
Cool. But, you know, I'm thinking of what you were saying. I just wanted to back up because, Denise, you were talking about all those little, you know, snatches of time that you had to write within. And it reminded me, I love this story that Toni Morrison was a single mom and she had a couple kids, and she'd come home from work and, you know, feed them dinner, help them with their homework. And she had about 15 minutes to herself before she went to bed. But she used that time to write, and it all added up to her first novel. Yeah. And so I do think that sometimes, and this is what I actually learned as a parent too, is I can't wait for the perfect time to write. I have to kind of make the time. And I heard this phrase to divide all those little snatches of time. It's called time confetti.
Oh, I like that.
I thought it was so good. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So if there are any viewers out there who are time challenged, and I think most of us are time challenged, I think that, and especially I think what you're talking about with that balancing act, and this goes for every author too, for traditionally published, that business side, that chunk of the pie chart, you're going to have to dedicate some time to it. So time management's a big part of this.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you know what I think is also a big part about it is just dealing with one's own hesitations and fear and anxiety and confidence, because I think like that leap, well, one, you have to deal with all those things in writing to start with, right? But then you have to deal with them in terms of like going deeper into your novel and finishing it and keep believing in it to finish it. I think all these emotional components are really important for the whole journey. So I really want to acknowledge them. And I'd love for you, if you can, to tell us if you had any of those hesitations or fears and how you got over them, either in the writing or the revising or the publishing process. Do you want to start, Denise, I guess?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm sorry to tell y'all, the anxiety's still there. Even after all this time. If anything, sometimes it's worse because like I have a lot of readers with expectations, and I always worry, am I meeting those expectations? Is this the book they want? And I start the book that way, and then I like end up like it gets in my head. So then I have to just tell myself to just write the book I want, write the book I want to read. And those books that I do are usually the ones that get the best reviews and get the best reception. So, but even now I still get in my head, is this what readers want? Am I writing to market? You know, that kind of thing. But of course it was worse in the beginning because I feel like I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was just writing words, you know. I didn't take any class. I took creative writing in a community college and flunked it. So
how did you manage that?
Wow.
Well, I kind of didn't turn in my assignment. So, okay. But still, right? I didn't like have any kind of formal training. And so I would feel totally intimidated. Like people ask me to speak and I will not speak on crafts because I don't know. I just write. It just like, I don't know. But yeah, so like, especially in the very beginning, I was super anxious. Like I felt like a fraud. Like I'm calling myself an author. I'm selling books. I kept waiting for someone to pull back the curtain and go, you're not an author. And I still feel like that some days. So it's always there. You just have to learn to just like push past it. And I think it's important to try to write. And sometimes I actually kind of lost this the last few years because it is a business and I treated it like a business, but I kind of lost that joy of writing. And so I'm writing a book right now that I love, and I'm writing it what I love. And so that joy of writing is returned. So I think that, and part of that has just been getting too much in my head, trying to make sure readers, this is what the book that readers wanted. So.
That's really important. I have to do that too, is to remind myself of the joy that I started with, you know, and that's the reason I'm doing this whole thing. So, and I think that makes your writing better too.
Yeah, I completely agree.
How about you, Kimberly? Do you wrestle with any of these? Or do you just wake up happy and ready to go and it all works out?
That's what's your secret sauce?
I just smile. No, I have had author friends for years. I had no idea what they went through on their side until I became one.
Yeah.
And I realized how vulnerable it is. You're putting this work of art out there, and how happy people are to judge it and stomp it down. And I had no idea, because I would even think about this, but everyone has 1-star reviews, and just keep that in mind.
Yes.
Even the greats, whoever you think is the best, go to their site. They will have 1-star reviews. And I'm in this one group, and we just post our 1-star reviews. It's almost like a badge of honor. Like, you've come if you can get a 1-star review, because I mean, that's not coming from like your grandma. So it's actually you made
Yeah, right.
So I have had numerous 1-star reviews, and I just have to not let that get into my head. Take it for what it is, and there's my badge of honor for the day.
That's so interesting, and reminds me of I know some people who will make a goal of like, I'm going to get 100 rejections this year, in order to kind of like spur them on to send their stuff to a lot of like publishers. And since you mentioned that you've got a kind of community framework around the 1-star reviews, do either of you, I mean, at NaNoWriMo, we're so much about developing that community to help people get over that anxiety and that imposter syndrome. Do you guys have community that you've developed or that you go to?
Yeah, I'm in several like author groups, like for mystery authors, and I'm in a big group called Club Indie, which is for indie authors who published at least 2 books, and we can like ask questions. Like, the rankings are kind of stuck this week on Amazon, so everybody's like posting, hey, my ranks are stuck, so we can all like see that there's a trend going on or whatever. And then I have, like, when I very first started, we all posted on Twitter during NaNoWriMo, and so people were like posting their daily counts, and so like I met a lot of authors who were not even published. We were all like first time NaNoWriMos, and like I met some really great friends. I met some critique partners that way. So I'm like, still publishing and stuff. So like Facebook, Twitter, although I don't know if Twitter's a safe place anymore.
Hard to know what's happening there.
Yeah. But yeah, especially Facebook. And then I know like Discord, I think there's some groups on there too, and that kind of thing. But just kind of reach out. Local writing communities. Like, I started off with a chapter of RWA, and that's where before I was ever like online with anybody. And so you can find critique partners and just support that way too.
Kimberly, do you have
that is a very important to have a group around you that you can bounce off ideas or bad ideas. I mean, I have 100 ideas a day all the time, so they have to be able to tell you, no, that's a bad idea. Like, if you can do that, then you've found the right group.
Well, I'm curious. I'm gonna kind of transitioned into this decision point between traditional and self-publishing. It seems like a big decision to me. I wondered how you made that decision, and maybe you, Denise, since you mentioned back when you were initially doing this, it was in the early days of self-publishing at best, right?
Yeah. So I finished my book. I had a first publishable book in 2010, and I started querying it because I was in the Romance Writers Association local chapter. And that's what you did. Like, you got a publisher. I also got a ton of rejections. So like I wrote 3 books and was querying them and was getting tons of rejections. And then I heard about self-publishing, but like, I was told it was vanity publishing. You can't do that. It means that you're not good enough. And then there was an agent that had a blog who I followed. His name was Nathan Bransford. He posted something about, sometimes a book just doesn't fit and it's not right. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. And I think that was like in March of 2011. And I took that and I was like, I'm running with it. Because I had a book I wanted anybody to read my book. Like, over 50 people had read 2 of my books. Like, I was like handing that file out to everyone to read, just read my book. So I had an agent who was interested in my urban fantasy, and nobody wanted my mystery, 28 and a half wishes. So I'm like, I'm going to self-publish it. And so I did in July. And I loved the freedom. Nobody was telling me no anymore. I was in charge of my own career. And so I decided I wasn't doing traditional publishing, and I just went straight indie. Now, since then, I have published with some traditional publishers. I published with Montlake and 47 North, which are both Amazon imprints, and then yeah, so I've published multiple different ways. You just have to realize that you lose control when you go with a publisher. They get to pick your cover. They often tell you how they want the story to go. They are often not the best at marketing your book. So even if you go traditional or small publisher, you're still going to have to market. Sorry, you still have to do it. So I would personally, if I go with a traditional publisher, it's usually because I have some business reason for doing so, and I realize that I'm going to lose money doing it, but I'm hopefully going to get in a bookstore where I can't on my own. So yeah.
It's interesting how many times the word control came up in that answer, and that
you
kind of brightened the first time. Yeah.
I just got tired of people telling me no. And, it was all dependent on who knew what, right? It could be that, I had some people say, well, I like this, but I got a similar project. So I just decided I'm just going to take charge. So, yeah.
How about you, Kimberly? How did you make that decision, or did you think about it?
When I had indie published on KDP 2 teen romance novels before I did my mystery novel. And I did that mainly for time, because I had a teenage daughter and I wanted her to read it. So that was mainly my goal. And I knew that I'd have to market it myself anyway. I had enough knowledge base on that, like what Denise was saying. So it was quicker. So for me, I was able to hire my own editor. I was able to project manage everything in a tighter time frame. I also had control over it, so that made it quicker as well. But then Kindle Vella came, and it was just the right timing for me. I had the Murder, Mayhem, Macarons. I had the manuscript, and it had everything. And so I've just continued with that.
That's cool. I have to apologize. When I introduced you, I said macarons and not macaroons, and it was my own typo.
Okay.
So I just want to clear the air here. That
I'll send you some.
It was a blunder. It was a
Very
blunder. Well, I want to ask. We're going to segue into getting some questions have been rolling in from viewers. So thank you so much for doing that, and continue to do that, please. And as I take a look at those questions and kind of queue them up for you all, I am curious just about how you prepare your novel to get it to that publishable state. And I know that, Denise, you mentioned that you have a developmental editor.
Yeah, I have.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a developmental editor who does line edits as well as content edit, like tells me if something's not working or suggests that I like the flow or the pacing slowed down or whatever. And then I also have a copy editor and a proofreader before it goes to print. So
there's a question here. I'll just jump into it, and then I can switch to you, Kimberly, to answer this too. Sarah Van Loon asks, how did you go about finding an editor? I think that's really challenging to find an editor.
For me, since I was brand new, I went into an authors group. It was on Facebook, the one I did. And I went to authors that wrote in the same genre, similar style books, and ask their opinion on different editors. And they gave me a couple that they used, and then I reached out to them and gave them a little sample of my work and worked out pricing and quotes from there.
Those like personal referrals of people you trusted.
Yes. Yeah.
And that community comes in handy there.
Yes.
I would absolutely say get personal referrals, because there's a wide variety of different people who call themselves editors.
Yeah. How about you, Denise?
Yeah, same. Mine were all like, I asked people at the very beginning. There weren't a lot of author groups that had that information. So I just asked other authors who I knew, like, who are you using, and just sent samples. But I also, like, some of them I read their books, so I kind of had a feel for, like, especially for like developmental. But my current developmental editor, I actually got through 47 North. She edited my books, and so I was like, hey, do you edit indie works? And she said, yeah. And so I've used her ever since. So yeah. But yeah, the personal referrals are huge. Don't just like pick anyone. I would definitely, and if you're struggling to find someone to ask and you do go to a website, then I would ask them for referrals, like, so you can talk to people. So, because it's a lot of money, especially in the beginning, you don't have a lot of money to spend. It's very important, I think, to have it edited. So, you know, you're not getting bad reviews for bad editing. So you're going to ask, you know, send sample chapters and have them edit and that kind of thing.
So it sounds like both of you use editors. You don't just wing it and trust yourself to.
Because sometimes you only have one chance to make a good impression. And if you have a really crappy book out there and someone reads it and they don't like it, they're going to remember your name and go, oh, well, Denise Swank writes really poorly edited books. I'm not going to read any more of hers. So you may have lost that person forever.
Yeah, I understand. I think this is probably a question mainly for you, Kimberly, but feel free to chime in, Denise. This comes from Anne-Marie Harvey. I have a universe where I am writing novels, but I have standalone short stories that are part of that universe. Would that be okay for Vella?
I know quite a few people doing short stories on Vella because the episode format ranges between 600 words and 5,000 words per episode. So depending on how you want to parcel up your story, you can do that way. That'd be a great way to check out Kindle Vella.
Interesting. This comes from What a Music Geek. I think both of you could handle this, but there is like one question about Vella. It's a multi-part question. Is self-publishing through Kindle Vella more rewarding than traditional publishing and finding an agent? Also, how can you keep up with writing novels and new covers for Vella? I guess that is all about Vella.
It's all about Vella.
Well, you know.
So which means it's for you, Kimberly.
Well, I'll do the easy one first. Covers on Vella are really super easy. The Kindle Vella platform, I'm technically challenged. I already admitted that to you earlier. And it is so easy, user-friendly to use, uploading your material. And the cover is a image that you upload, and it comes in a circle. And it can be a stock image if you have a very low budget. I started with a stock image. And I think it was $8 that I paid for it, make sure it's commercially licensed. And so anybody could start in that. It doesn't have to be formatted in a certain way, or, I mean, it's really easy. So covers are great. So what was the other?
Let's see. The first question was, is self-publishing through Kindle Vella more rewarding than traditional publishing and finding an agent?
I don't know if it's more rewarding. I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. I like the interactive nature of dealing. You get a lot more interaction with the readers than traditional publishing. So
that's a good point.
Then you like that.
I would say that's true.
Yeah, that's interesting. This next question from Chrissy Dallas goes, I had some questions later on this topic, but I think this is great to hit it now. So what marketing practices work best for both of you and your stories? And how are those different for print, ebook versus Kindle Vella books? So big marketing question. How about you, Denise? What are your favorite ways to market?
Well, I don't market my print books. I just don't. Self-publishing, you don't sell that many, especially like with mystery or romance. Although I do want to get into large print. That's one area I haven't like got into that I could reach like a library audience with. I usually, like when I have a new release come out, especially in a series, I will put the first book, or if it's like a series where you have to read them in order, I'll put the first book on sale. And then I do a bunch of sites where they will publish them in their newsletters that they send out every day. Like Free Booksy, Booksins, Book Gorilla, there's a Book Cave, there's a whole bunch of things. All you have to do is like look for promotional sites for self-published books or indie books. But also like with romances, like it depends on your genre. It's very different. So like with romances, when I write those, we do a lot of pop-ins with other romance author groups and give away a book or a gift box or whatever. So that's where it comes in really handy to either have a PR firm or to make friends with other authors in your genre. And I really can't stress that enough, like to have friends with other authors in your genre, because you know, if trends are changing, you can talk to them. Marketing trends change, and they will also like promote your books too. Like cross promotion is a huge thing.
Yeah, the community keeps coming back as a theme. How about you, Kimberly? What are your favorite marketing practices?
So for Kindle Vella, the first 3 episodes on any Vella are free. So that is a Kindle Vella policy. So you have to make sure those 3 episodes are amazing. So definitely spend your time on those, and especially the first episode, because when you do like maybe a Facebook ad, you can link it directly to the first episode and they could read it completely for free. So it's almost like getting a sample in regular Amazon days. So really come in strong with the characters people want to read more about. Like you got to just make sure your characters pop in those first, at least the first one, not the first 3 episodes.
You got to earn your readership.
Absolutely. And it's not like authors can choose to give away a Vella. That is not currently a thing. So you have to make sure those 3 that are free that you can give away really hook them to come back.
Interesting.
Well, you mentioned something that I forgot, like Facebook ads and Amazon ads. I also use those. So, but Facebook ads, it takes a while to figure those out. Playing around with Amazon ads. So, yeah.
Interesting.
But the others, like the cross promotion with other authors, that's free. So that's invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The more organic stuff is very valuable. Yeah. Well, this is a question from Kira L. How does Amazon Vella submission process work? Is there moderation for good spelling and grammar?
No, there is not moderation for good spelling and grammar. They do check it for plagiarism, copyright stuff. I don't know all of the things they check it for, but you submit it into a system. It's very, very easy. There'll be a new episode. You title it, and do me a favor, if you learn anything from me, make sure you have a great title. Don't just call it chapter 1. That's the worst. That's not people. So many people say chapter 1. No. You got to have it a great title. My first Vella has all Southern sayings as titles. But it could be anything. Just make the title catch. Like you got to read that episode. And then after you do the title, you'll copy in your text for that episode. And I always write outside of the Kindle Vella because there might be a little spelling help in there, but I mean, you really want to have it all ready to go before you copy the text in. And then you are ready to publish. It's so easy.
That's so interesting about the title, because that's TV shows actually do that. They'll have a title, although it plays a different role, perhaps. It just made me think about the long history of serialized novels, you know, going back to Dickens and probably before Dickens, but Dickens was very famous. I think a lot of people don't realize that nearly all of his novels started out as serialized novels.
The Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah. Have you studied the, you know, kind of?
I went back because when I think serialized, I thought of those. Like that's really what I thought of. But then I also did some research on Radish and Wattpad on the current trends. So I think it's important to go, like, you could read both and see the similarities and what's happening.
Well, since Kira L asked that previous question, she has one more that I'll ask. What kind of readership is typical for a Vella author? And how much of that readership tends to be from paid versus free chapters?
It really depends on how much you're willing to put in on the business side. If you just throw your book up there and let it be, you might not get any reads. So it's there's a lot of work on the author side of that equation. But I mean, I get, I'm trying to think.
You don't have to give us your tax returns.
Tax return.
And I know you're not a spokesperson for Kindle Vella, so you might not be privy to all this.
I'm happy. Yeah, I don't know.
But feel free to if you want.
But anyway, you could go up and see my books. But I've been very happy, but I've also worked really hard at it. Yeah. So
it all requires, being a writer takes hard work the whole way, no matter how you do it.
Yeah. On the business side and the writing side.
Yep, definitely. Let me see. So Ellen Porter asks, how do you find the authors groups that you're involved in? How did you find them?
Well, when I first started finding them, I usually from another author. Like I became friends with other authors, and then they'd start a group and I'd join it, or somebody would invite me to join, or I'd hear about one and ask to join. But I know there's a lot of like broad groups out there. So like one of them is really good. It's open to anyone who's not published. 20 books to 50K is a really great book on, or a group on Facebook. There's like over 50,000 members in there, I think. So it's not something you're going to like get a personal connection with, but you're going to see a lot of authors talking about what worked for them, what didn't work for them. They're really big about sharing their numbers, like how much money they made last year. Like there's been a lot of people posting like, here's how much money I made last year and compare it to years before, and here's how I got there. So that would be a really invaluable group for new authors to go to. And they have like a convention every year in Las Vegas in November. So that would be like one way, but like also like personal writing, you know, if you're doing like a local writing group, they might have their own Facebook group. It's kind of like, it's really a lot about who you know and that kind of thing. Like you meet one person and then you get introduced to someone else. It's the community. So I know it's hard to like break in, but very beginning, like I first published 2011, and like I had a series that was doing really well with urban fantasy. So I reached out, I found the emails for the two authors who were doing as well as I was at the time. And I emailed them and I said, hey, are you guys interested in cross promotion? Well, then they became friends. And then I met other people through them. It just kind of all like split out. So don't be afraid to do that. Now, don't like reach out to someone who's like, if you're not selling very well, don't reach out to someone in the top 10 and expect on Kindle and expect them to like promote you. Kind of like find people within your same level, because you guys will all like the problems or triumphs that the person in the top 10 are having aren't the same that you're going to have. So you're going to want to be with people who like understand what you're going through at the time too. So. Yeah,
that's so interesting. I find that communities often are like that, a writer's community. It's like one part intention, one part reaching out, and one part just it happens organically and you lose track of how you really are in different communities. Or that's the way it's worked with me, at least. Yeah. How about you, Kimberly?
There's a great group I would recommend to anyone starting out on Kindle Vella, and I think it's simply called Kindle Vella Getting Started. And it has a mix of, I mean, Kindle Vella has only been out for 18 months or so. I mean, so just call us veterans, but the ones that have been from the get-go, we're on there, and other new people. It's a great place to get started. And then once you're on that one, you'll see the other groups come as you participate. Yeah.
You mentioned this, Denise, about people sharing their income or sharing a lot of things about being an author. And I have to just say that the indie author community in general is more of an open book, or I find it more of an open book of knowledge sharing and support and like sharing details like finances. And you know, I don't know exactly why that is, but there's a whole different kind of thing that happens with traditionally published authors.
Yeah, traditionally back when, especially when I started, it was all a big secret. Like they didn't talk about advances. So I went to my first NEAP, which is National Novel Writers. I can't remember what it stands for now. But it was in New York. It was in 2013. And like all these traditional authors who had written for years also had day jobs because they didn't make enough money. And I realized that they weren't hard. Yeah, New York wasn't paying. They had the prestige. I'd rather have the money. I mean, honestly. So they were all like taking their backlist and putting them on, and up on Amazon, because they could actually make money for the first time in their writing careers. But it was because there was such a secrecy. Nobody knew how much anybody was making. And so I think that's maybe part of why. And like, I think a lot of people in the very beginning in indie publishing wanted to prove that they weren't just like vanity publishing, that this was like legit. And yeah, I was on a panel in 2012 and told that I should get an agent and publish a book the right way. I heard that many times, bookstores, and and I said, well, I've been published for 10 months and I've sold 100,000 books and made over $100,000. So I'm pretty happy the way I am. So I just
you found the right way.
Part of us were just like trying to prove that, hey, we're at the table too. And so I think that's probably part of where that openness came from, that we were wanting to show that, hey, we're legit too.
Anything to add there, Kimberly?
No, I think Kindle Vella authors are very willing to share. Like I was just going to share here, but definitely go and ask people that are successful what are they doing and how much like money they're spending on advertising and costs too that are going involved.
Yeah, it's important. Do you feel like, since you mentioned the phrase, Denise, the right way, do you feel like there is that stigma still for indie authors? I mean, I feel like indie authors are still kind of fighting the fight,
Yeah, it's still there. It's more accepted now than it used to be. I tried to get a signing at Barnes & Noble, and they were like, no, do it the right way. I went to a local bookstore that's kind of nationally renowned. A lot of people go there. And they told me the woman offered to introduce me to her son, who was an agent in Wisconsin. But yeah, good. I made $300,000 last year. I'm good. So anyway, so it's not as much, but it still is. Like, we still can't get into bookstores as easily, and even though we have print on demand, it won't compete with print book prices of traditional publishers, because they're mass producing them and sending them out to warehouses. But then those copies are also being sent back when they're not sold. So I've done the traditional thing where I had print books, but then I lost money because the books came back, and they take it out of your money that you as an author have to pay for them. So like, you're cut of them. So there's like good and bad. And the shelf life in a bookstore, I realize the shelf life in a bookstore is very, very small. It's a very short period of time. So
really short.
Really worth fighting to get into a bookstore, because they were just going to send my books back anyway. So unless you're like a mega producer like Colleen Hoover, they're just not going to keep them around. So
yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize there's a real seasonality to bookstores, and if you don't have strong enough sales in those first couple months, you basically go away. It's a whole different kind of rhythm. Well, Blaze the Runner Goldthorn says, I have a general question about writers facing barriers such as neurodiversity, anxiety issues, etc. What advice can you offer to help with the vital but difficult task of reaching out to people? I don't know if that falls within your area of expertise, but if there's...
Well, I think it would probably help that most of the time you're reaching out through direct messages or emails, so it's not that face-to-face interaction. I would think that would help with anxiety. So you can take some time crafting an email or a message or whatever to make sure that you've got it right, I would think. There are also, I found that there's a lot of authors that are like, that have those, anxiety and whatever, and they're like starting to talk about it, that they have this issue and they're neurodivergent. Like Penny Reed is a romance author, and she's very open about the fact that she's realized that she is, and the obstacles she faces and stuff. So I would encourage you to maybe check her out on Facebook. Penelope Reed, REID. She does a lot of posting about her experience with that. So, and I know there are others out there. I just can't think of them right now.
How about you, Kimberly? Anything to add?
No, I mean, I would say most of what I do is not face-to-face, unlike this. I do a lot of advertisements that I'm doing that I that I can post, and Facebook things that I could post, reels and stuff. So yeah, actually it's probably less face-to-face time.
Mm-hmm. We writers, we have the stereotype of being introverted.
That's all right. Guilty.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, Amanda Minchin asks, what output of work do you need to publish in order to be profitable in self-publishing? Is there a volume? Is there like a rhythm, a regularity? Like once you have like a readership, do you need to like be feeding them with more stories?
The more often you can publish, the better. But it's a tricky balance because the Amazon algorithms like it when you publish. They kind of gets the churn going so that they'll promote you. And then it used to be like the book itself, like it used to have a longer like algorithm cycle, and it comes, nobody knows what it is, but we can tell by looking at, you can like, if you're tracking your sales, you can see a cliff when it like falls off. So like I try to publish at least 4 times a year, usually more.
A novel each time.
Yeah. And like sometimes I've like published novellas in between if there's going to be like a larger gap, just to like try to keep my name out there, keep me fresh in the Amazon algorithm. And yeah, because Amazon just likes it when you put up new content. Especially if you can get some reviews, then they'll like send it out. And it's important too to get people to follow you on Amazon if they're going to be Amazon readers, because Amazon will usually send out a notice that you've got a pre-order or you have a new release, and so that's important too.
Kimberly, how about you?
That's very similar to Kindle Vella. The follow is very, very important. So after I did my first Vella, I had a gap in time. And that was probably the biggest mistake I had so far, because I had my readers trained like every Sunday. What they do is they're going to read, 2,000 words from Kimberly Titus, like every Sunday. And then I stopped and they stopped and I had to start that up. That is very hard to do. So once you start a Vella or a series, I would plan to continue that and not have any type of lag or gap in that, even though so if I'm doing season 1, now I'm fast drafting season 2. So right now for NaNoWriMo 2022, I did Death by Punchline. So I have a whole new series and it's in season 1, but now at my daily activity, I'm drafting season 2. So there won't be a gap for the readers at the end of season 1. That makes sense.
So season, is that like a season 3 months?
Yeah, it depends how many episodes. I mean, and it depends how fast you release episodes. I like to release 2 a week. So my episodes are between 1,500 and 2,500 words. So that'd be like 3,000 to 5,000 words a week that I'm publishing. And so then it depends. So yeah, about 3, maybe 3.5 months would be 1 book, would be 1 season. And then I would have the next one just like ready to go on the back.
Interesting. This comes from Ellen Porter, this question. Denise, do you use the marketing services KDP offers for a price?
Like Amazon advertising, yes, I definitely do that. Yeah. There is kind of a steep learning curve with that, but Amazon, I believe they have some content on there to help you like walk you through it. And then there's a lot of author ad courses out there. Like Brian Cohen has one that's free, and obviously he's trying to get you to buy into his bigger package. But I've done the free one and learned things from that without moving on to his. So
it's kind of related from Mika Shipley. Is there a method for when to release a book? For instance, my book is ready to be published on KDP. Should I market first and then publish?
There used to be a philosophy that your best bet was to release 3 books before you ever marketed anything. I'm not so sure that's true, but don't spend a lot of money marketing 1 book until you have at least 1 more book behind it for them to read, because they might forget you. So it's really important that you have a newsletter so that you can entice them to join that if possible. So what I usually do is have some kind of bonus content, like an epilogue or, another extra chapter that's just bonus material. So I tell them, if they click over, they can read this bonus chapter, and it signs them up for my newsletter. So then when I have a new release, I can send them the newsletter too, because there's a lot of books out there and they're going to forget you. You want to so I would recommend that not put any money into marketing until you have at least 2 books out, because then you want them to buy the next book too. So otherwise you're just because honestly, when I publish a series, and there are formulas to figure this out, you can check your read through, and you can spend more than the book costs on marketing, as long as you've got the read through. So, I have a series that I know it's a short series, 3 books. I know if everyone, the people who buy the first book, the percentages that are going to buy the next 2 books, and I can spend $5 on advertising per sale, and I'm going to break even. So I know even though the book may cost $2.99, I could spend $3 on that book, and I'm going to make $2 on advertising. So there's a lot of formulas to figure that out. A lot of people will put their first book for free. Perma-free used to be really big back in the day. A lot of people were like, I'm not putting my book for free, but that's how I sold so many copies of my Rose Gardner series back in 2014 through 16 or so. That perma-free was huge, and readers would get the first book for free, and then they would read through the series. And so it's called a loss leader. It's a business thing. You have to think of it as a business. So so I would definitely not market 1 book, especially if you're a brand new author. I'd wait till you have at least 2, preferably 3 if possible. So, obviously you can do free stuff, but I wouldn't spend any money really on advertising until you have at least 2.
I'm going to put out a last call for questions. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to them, but we just have a few minutes left. But Sarah Van Loon asks, this is for both of you, have either of you ventured into audiobooks? And so it brings up the question actually of all kinds of formats. How about you, Kimberly?
No, I'm relatively new, and I'm just trying to tackle one thing at a time. But right now, I am strictly on KDP and Kindle Vella.
Okay. Denise?
Yes, I am. When I first started out, I did royalty share, which is a great way to do it when you're brand new. You don't put out any money, you don't pay the narrator, you agree to share the royalties with the narrator for 7 years. But you're also locked in for 7 years. So I would suggest, to get a book narrated and have a good narrator, depending on the length of the book, they charge per finished hour. It can cost me anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 to get a book narrated. But if a book's not selling well, you're probably not going to sell it. Ebook sales and audiobook sales tend to go hand in hand. So if you don't have a series that's selling well, I wouldn't put the money into audio yet. I would wait till you're selling better before you do so. But I'm selling a lot more audio than I used to, because there are a lot more audio listeners than there used to be, even 7 years ago when I was first starting with audio.
It is the one big growth portion of the book industry, I think.
But I have not found an effective way to market audio, and I've heard a lot of authors say the same thing. One way is Chirp. It's like a BookBub, and if you guys don't know BookBub, check out BookBub, because that's a feature is if you can get this gold. It's expensive, but it sells a lot of books, or it does a lot of free downloads. But they also have an audiobook thing, but you can't, if you go through Amazon's ACX and Audible, you have to be exclusive to them, and you can't put a deal in Chirp. So I'm kind of hamstrung that way, because almost all my books are exclusive to Amazon through Audible. So, but that I've heard Chirp is really great way to get a lot of audio sales.
Well, we're almost at time, so I have one final question for you to answer, to kind of galvanize everyone on the webcast to go out there and do this and believe in themselves. I do want to thank Kindle Direct Publishing and Kindle Vella for sponsoring NaNoWriMo and for sponsoring this webcast. So big thanks on that count. So my final question is just what is the best piece of advice you can leave our viewers with to help them do this?
Kimberly, you want to go first?
You're going to go with me? Just do it. This is my advice. Just do it. I know a lot of my friends, they just, they're thinking about it, they have it, they're stuck, and just make a plan and do it, because that's the only way. It's the only way you'll learn. I've learned a lot in the last 2 years since I took that leap of faith. And now I'm publishing full time, and just I've never been happier. So just do it.
It's like NaNoWriMo, right? You jump in.
Yes.
You might be scared of writing a novel. It might sound like really big and daunting, but the best way to learn how to write a novel is to write a novel.
Yeah, and I would agree, just do it. Like, obviously, try to make sure you put your best product forward, and depending on where you're at in your career, if you're brand new, you may only be able to afford a copy edit and have people, who like catch typos to read, for proofreading. And there's there's pretty inexpensive covers out there. So like, try to make sure you have a decent cover, at least a semi-edited book. But yeah, just do it. And even if you publish a book and it doesn't sell well at the beginning, it doesn't mean it's not going to. These things are like, have endless shelf life. So it could be that 10 years from now, you can like revive this book or whatever. So yeah, through advertising. So yeah, just do it.
All right. Well, I hate to end on a Nike slogan, but it works. It
Yeah,
should have been
exactly.
NaNoWriMo. Just write it, right? Yeah. Anyway.
Just write it.
Yeah.
Write it.
Just write
There
it.
you go. And just
Yeah.
publish it if that's what you want to do. Yeah.
Exactly. Just write it, just revise it, just publish it. So we'll do that, the NaNoWriMo version. So thank you so much. This was so fun to hear your stories, and I learned a lot, and I hope our viewers did. And once again, thanks to Kindle Direct Publishing and Kindle Vella